If you think flipping sports cards is easy, think again. If you're new to this world, I want this to be a reality check because sports card investing or flipping or whatever you want to call it is just the ultimate game of supply and demand. And with so much money at stake, you can easily end up in a dangerous spot very quickly. Now, even if you are purely a collector, you've probably noticed that the cards you want to chase are easily 5 to 10 times the price as what they were in 2019. So regardless of how you identify yourself or what you focus on in the hobby, the goal of this video is to save you money by pointing out all the factors and nuances I see on the supply side so you could buy at a lower price and then collect or invest even more. So with that being said, welcome back. Now let's get to work. Real quick, if you have been in the hobby for a while, this video is probably going to be a bit basic for you, but if I miss a major point, please mention it in the comment section so we can all grow from it. I learned from y'all just as much, if not more, than you learned from me. Anyway, if you took economics in school, you're probably familiar with how supply and demand works. It's like a seesaw. When more people want a product and supply stays the same, prices tend to go up. When less people want the product and supply stays the same, prices tend to go down. Simple enough. The whole toilet paper and hand sanitizer frenzy we saw last year was a perfect example of that. I'll go over the demand side in part 2, but the challenge with sports cards is that there are 3 separate levels of supply. So let's start with the simplest one, which is knowing how many of a specific card actually exists. And this is tough because unfortunately, print runs of modern cards aren't disclosed by Panini, who is the sole licensee of the NBA and NFL. And I know Top discloses some of their Topps Now product, but I don't believe it's with all their product. And if you have more insight on that, again, let us know in the comment section. But the bottom line is that we don't have an exact picture of how many of the average card is printed. All we have are hints of scarcity based on how many of a certain parallel come in a box or a case and how many different cards there are in the checklist. So we would still need to know how many boxes were produced to do the math, but that's pretty much it. The one huge exception to this are serial numbered cards, which of course are getting more and more popular because it solves the problem of not knowing how many of that card is in existence. And if you're newer to sports cards, these are specific cards that are numbered on the back. So it will literally say 75 of 199 on the back or whatever the print run is up to. And it could be as rare as 1 of 1. Now, the downside is that serial numbered cards are usually far more expensive, as they should be, and anyone, including myself, can still overpay for any card, whether it is scarce or not. So knowing the entire supply of an average card is nearly impossible, but what makes things even tougher to figure out is the fact that sending cards into grade is such a huge part of the hobby now. If 100,000 of a particular card was manufactured, not every card will be the same, and grading companies such as PSA, BGS, and SGC determine which ones are in better condition than others using their 10-point scale. So now the question is not only how many of the cards exist, how many of this card exists in a particular grade at this moment, let's say a 10, then it's how many of this card is sitting in a box at the grading company that will receive a 10, and then how many of this card is at someone's house or still sitting in the actual unopened box of cards that will eventually make its way to a grading company and receive that 10. And one thing that is nice is that these larger grading companies, PSA, BGS, SGC, they actually show how many of each card has been graded and what grades they have been given out. The big mystery is still how many of them are sitting in their offices yet to be graded or about to be sent in that is not inputted into their system just yet. Now, if you want to take this a step further and get really specific, a lot of people like to crack open cases of cards that have received grades of 9.5 or less to resubmit to either the same company or to a different one to shoot for the higher grade. And that's worth mentioning because in many, if not most cases, that is not being reported to the grading company, so they can actually adjust their count and lower it. Personally, I don't worry so much about that just because the other issues around supply are a lot bigger and a lot more impactful. All right, so now we know we have the challenge of determining the actual supply of the card. We have the challenge of determining the supply of a specific grade of that card and what that will evolve into the future. And now there's one more level of supply to factor in, and that is the supply of that card currently for sale on a given platform. So check it out. There could be 318 Michael Jordan PSA 10s in existence, but that does not mean there are 318 for sale. In fact, most aren't for sale or aren't publicly listed for sale. So what happens is that if there's only one listed for sale and 100 people want it, you could easily see a bidding war for it. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly what happened a few months ago when we saw this exact Jordan rookie sell for over $700,000. Once that happened, it caught the attention of other collectors who have this card that perhaps never thought it would go this high. And then all of a sudden, if 10 of them want to sell right away and try to get that $700,000 payday or similar amount, now the supply of active listings has increased from 1 to 10, and instead of a bidding war going on for the card, now you have a lot more sellers offering the card, and it's more of a buyer's market. And we just saw this recently with LeBron James's Topps Chrome PSA 10 rookie card as well. It climbed from 12,800 to 18,000 in about a week's time. And then all of a sudden, we had these flash auctions popping up on eBay as sellers were trying to quickly capitalize on that increase in value. And I experience this on a small scale on CompC all the time, where I'll go from controlling the supply of a specific card on that platform and selling for the price I want to 10 other sellers sending in that exact card and then undercutting me on the price. And I'm not upset at all, because that is just literally the name of the game, and it just helps me get smarter and fine-tune my strategy. All right, so how do we actually use this information to make better purchasing decisions? And for me, the biggest change I wanted to make in the last couple months with the cards I'm buying is really having a good idea of where the PSA pop report would end up at, which is why I wanted to shift my focus to players that had been in whatever league for a couple years, and then preferably players that have been good for several years. So hopefully collectors and investors would have sent their cards in for grading by early 2020, and those cards would have been back out by now. Now, I would still expect the pop number to grow on that card, but just not nearly as much as a rookie or a player that is just starting to emerge in the last year. The other reason is that a lot more cards are being printed now versus a few years ago. So not only do you have to concern yourself with how the player will turn out, you could end up paying a lot more money for a card that will wind up having 15,000 or more in existence in just a PSA 10 alone. If you take a look at Zion Williamson's Prism-based PSA 10, to me, this was like the mascot card of 2020. He was the next big thing, and his Prism rookie card and all the parallels was the card to have. And I saw this card on Instagram and on YouTube more than any other card by a long shot. But now, over a year later, there are over 14,000 of his base Prism rookie cards in a PSA 9 and 18,000 in a PSA 10, and we still have no idea how many more are going to make its way through PSA in the next couple of years. So my thought process is that not only do I want to go after a parallel like a silver, because there may only be 2,000 or so in existence in a PSA 10, but also because if I had pulled that card from a pack, based on the value of that card at that moment of time, I would have used an expedited service to get that card graded, and I imagine most collectors and investors would have done the same thing as well. And that means the card would have been in and out of PSA's system much quicker, thus revealing a more up-to-date pop count. So just remember that the cheaper the card, the more it makes sense to go with a more affordable, slower grading service. And because of that, the longer it could sit in the grading company's offices without being input into their database. So for me, I'm very skeptical regarding the accuracy of a pop count of a card that was worth $100 or less back when the bulk and 30-day services were available through PSA and the other grading companies. And as for older cards from the 80s through 2000s, we know that at least 1 million or so of these cards were sent in last year as well, but there are a few differences. The first is that grading was never a thing back then, and card prices in general were like a 20th of what they are now. So many of these older cards were just thrown in binders or boxes, and so the likelihood of them earning a PSA 10 are much lower than a newer product because of the difference in how we treat our cards. The other difference is that collectors had decades to submit these cards for grading. So even a couple years ago, like in 2017, when I heard sports cards were really starting to gain traction again, collectors and investors could have sent these cards in for grading. And because of these two factors combined, I think to myself, If it is a main rookie card or rare insert of a Hall of Famer and it's a PSA 10, I feel very confident that the vast majority of them in existence, like 90%, have already been processed. If, however, it's like a 1990 Fleer base Michael Jordan, which is a fourth-year card that was worth almost nothing a few years ago, then I'd be very hesitant to go in on it right now, because I know it would have only made sense to send that card in for grading over the past year. And I especially wouldn't pay much for anything besides a PSA 10, because I would imagine the vast majority of those cards coming back from PSA would be 9s and 8s, since it just wasn't a thing to keep mass-produced non-rookie base cards of emerging stars in pristine shape. And back then in 1990, Jordan was an emerging star, not the best to ever play. And real quick, I want to give a special shout out to Ryan over at GemRate for tracking a lot of this data around pop count growth. So make sure to check out his Instagram for more. He's doing some really cool things there. Lastly on supply, remember the MJ rookie card example. If you know that there are hundreds or thousands of that specific card, but there's only 1 or 2 auctions going on for that card at this given moment, those listings may get a ton of watchers and may end up selling at a high price that will lure other owners of that card to list theirs, thus making it worthwhile to perhaps hold off until several auctions are going on at the same time. Keep in mind that some of the watchers of eBay auctions are other owners of that card, and they're just waiting to see what the card will sell for so they can decide if it's worth listing theirs. I do it, and I'm sure thousands of other people do it as well. There are also price alert features on a lot of these data tools that will notify you when a sale occurs under or over a specific price, so you can then take action. For example, I have several price alerts set up for cards I'm looking to buy in the near future, but I'm just waiting for the price to drop to a level I'm good at. And then I also have several price alerts for cards I own. I'm just waiting for the recent sale to hit that number so I could list mine for a similar amount. Just remember that a lot of this is going on. Now, if you're feeling overwhelmed by all this, remember we still haven't gone over demand, which is a whole other beast, but also that this ought to be fun. Now, I personally love learning about the game and doing my best to keep up with how fast it's evolving and all the nuances involved, but you don't have to dive so deep into the analytics and strategic side of the hobby if that does not interest you. I just want you to be aware of all the complexities involved so you can at least make better informed decisions for any card you choose to buy for whatever reason you buy it. If you found a bit of insight in this video, please make sure to pound that like button. And in part 2, I'll cover the demand side of the equation. I will see you over there.